Good afternoon, everyone. I see we have attendees trickling in still, so I'm going to give it a few more minutes. We have around 10 people of 70 registered, so we'll give it a moment before we get started. And thank you for joining us today. Okay, we have more attendees in the room now, so I will kick it off. Thank you for coming today to the Outcome Measurement Tool in Monitoring Proration webinar. I'm joined by several MOVA staff that will be presenting today, and will answer any of your questions that you have around how MOVA monitors the outcome measurement tool and how prorating strategies we can go through today. Stephanie, next slide, please. So we'll start off with introductions. My name is Kristen Wen. I'm the Director of Grants Administration at MOVA, and I will be playing a supporting role during this webinar this afternoon. So I'll be mostly in the background helping with technical assistance, questions and answers, and towards the end when we do some questions and answers as well. Laura, I'll pass it off to you for introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Fox. I am a monitoring and compliance specialist at MOVA, so I oversee MOVA's site visits.
Hello, my name is Amelia Pease, and I am the data manager at MOVA.
Hi, my name is Hannah Hancha, and I am the data coordinator.
Hi, I'm Red Pollen, and I'm a data analyst intern at MOVA.
Thanks, everyone. A few logistics before we get started into the agenda and the overview. So as you know, this is a Zoom webinar. So attendees today will not be seen or heard during the webinar. You will be present as audience members, and you'll be able to see the presenters and the presentation. This will be recorded, so this will be available for viewing at a later time. We will send an announcement out when it is posted and available on MOVA's website. The slides and the recording will both be available. If you do have any technical issues today, please let us know in the chat function. Otherwise, we would ask that all questions and answers are, or questions are placed into the Q&A function of Zoom. That way our team can better monitor the questions that are coming in, the answers that are provided, and we can do our best to answer any questions, whether in writing or verbally. And if you have any specific questions that are more related to your program directly, we can encourage you to reach out to your program coordinator or reach out to our team here following this webinar to help with some one-on-one technical assistance. So that's some logistics for Zoom, but as far as the agenda goes today, Laura will be covering the outcome measurement tool monitoring and what this will look like when your organization receives a site visit or a monitoring event from MOVA. And Hannah and Amelia will also be going through some data proration strategies. And we have some polls and some questions and answers that will get us thinking about what data proration means and how it may apply to your MOVA funded program. And finally, Red will be going through a data proration tool that has been developed for organizations to use. It's an optional tool. It's amazing, the work that has been put into it. So we're very proud to present it today. And we will answer any questions that you may have about monitoring data or the tool that has been developed. With that, I am going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to pass it along to Laura to talk more about MOVA's monitoring process and how we monitor the outcome measurement tool. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Kristen. So as Kristen said, my name is Laura Fox. I'm a monitoring and compliance specialist at MOVA, and I'll be going over what you can expect at the time of a site visit when it comes to how we are looking at the outcome measurement tool. Next slide. So there's 3 things I'm going to be covering. The first is the answers to the pre-visit worksheet questions. So these are questions that you complete on eGrants before a site visit takes place. We'll go through the OMT questions together and what MOVA is looking for in those answers. And then we'll talk about backup documentation for the OMT. This is something new that we started asking for in FY25. Before that time, we had conversations about the OMT during site visits. Something that we are now required to look at is not only talking about what your procedures are for completing the OMT, but actually seeing what that data looks like in your internal records and seeing that you're able to connect every data point that's reported on the OMT back to a place in your internal records. And then the last thing I'll be talking about is how we are going to be monitoring data proration at site visit. Next slide. So these are the pre-visit worksheet questions, part 1. So these questions can be found in eGrants when you have a site visit on the compliance monitoring report in the award administration monitoring worksheet. The OMT questions are questions 28A through 28G. Question 28A is asking about what your process is for collecting data. So MOVA wants to know from the time a client makes contact with your agency, what steps do you take to get demographic data and direct service data, goals and key outcomes? How do you gather that data? How do you record it? And how do you retain it? And we're looking for you to answer in detail each step of what that process looks like in the worksheet. 28B is asking about how you take all of that data from your internal records and put it into the OMT on a quarterly basis. We want to know what steps your organization takes each quarter to complete the OMT. And then question 28C is asking how the data can be validated. And 28D is asking for you to attach a sample quarter of backup documentation. I'll go into detail about what that means in a second, but first we'll go through the other worksheet questions on the next slide. Okay, 28E is the question we have about data proration. This is another question that's new in FY25. It says, if any personnel under the award are only partially funded by award funds, what steps are taken to ensure only funded services are reported on the OMT? Please describe the proration process. That's the place where we want you to tell us about if you prorate the data and how. And then questions 28F and 28G are asking for you to describe progress made on the OMT goals and OMT key outcomes. Next slide. Okay, so what do we mean when we ask for a sample of OMT backup documentation? OMT backup documentation refers to your agency's internal records that show where each data point on the OMT came from. So this is going to look different for different organizations. Some organizations have a database where they can run a report, and that report will show every data point that's on the OMT. If that's the case, then that report can be run and attached to the monitoring worksheets as backup documentation for the OMT. For other folks, there's lots of different methods of gathering that OMT data. So you may have activity logs for staff or consultant invoices that list services that were provided, hotline call logs, support group attendance sheets, whatever your procedure for gathering your quarterly data for the OMT, at the time of the site visit, we need to see that data. So all of that, every data point that's on the OMT has to be gathered and the backup has to be submitted at the time of the site visit. Many folks may use MOVA's data tracker, which is something that MOVA created in cases where it's difficult to show that backup documentation, and that's available on MOVA's website. And that's also a form of acceptable backup documentation. So we will be reviewing that backup documentation at the time of the site visit. We're looking to see that each and every data point that's on the OMT is traceable to something in your internal records. This includes demographics, direct services, goals, and key outcomes. That second bullet point is very, very important, that all PII or personally identifiable information needs to be redacted. So when you send the backup documentation with your monitoring worksheets, it shouldn't include any client information such as names, addresses, email addresses. So for some folks, that may be something you can easily block out in a report. I've seen other backup documentation where it's had to be blacked out. Either one is acceptable. We just want to make sure that no personally identifiable information is submitted to MOVA. And then the last point is that all of the backup documentation from the OMT should be retained in accordance with MOVA's record retention requirements, which is for a minimum of 7 years. So all of those records need to be maintained, made available at the time of the site visit. Next slide. And then the last thing that we are monitoring when it comes to the OMT during the site visit is data proration. So we are going to be looking to see if your organization is required to prorate your OMT data. So at that time, please be prepared to explain why you do or do not prorate the data and what method of proration you use, if applicable. We'll be checking to see that the correct data proration is being used and can be reconciled between your backup documentation and your OMT report. And with that said, we'll now get into what data proration is and how to do it. And I'll pass to Hannah.
Hi, everybody. So me and Amelia are going to be talking a little bit about data proration, what it is, when to use it, some examples, strategies, scenarios, bunch of good stuff. Next slide. So OMT data proration. Many subrecipients, like Laura had mentioned, have multiple funding sources supporting their programs and services. So in this little graph below, you can see the total program budget is broken out into 3 different funding sources. Of course, one of them being a MOVA administered award. In this case, it is important to remember when you're reporting MOVA's OMT data that you should only report data on the individuals served and services provided through your MOVA administered awards. Next slide. So in some situations, like Laura had mentioned, tracking each individual served and services provided by funding source may be challenging or not possible. In these circumstances, you should apply a proration strategy to ensure that the appropriate amount of data is being reported on MOVA's OMT. And we'll be going over those strategies, when to apply them, when to know if you need to prorate. We'll be touching on all of that. So when is OMT data prorating necessary? So if you have more than one source of funding to support your grant project, like shown in the graph below, and you do not have a method of tracking which individuals and services were supported by your MOVA grant funds versus your other funds, you'll need to apply a prorating strategy. Now I'm going to pass it off to Amelia to talk about those strategies.
Thanks. Today, we're going to present you with 3 prorating strategies. These are recommended by OBC and by MOVA. You can use these if tracking MOVA-funded activities separately from your other activities is not possible in your organization. There are more ways to prorate data. You may have your own system that is working for you that you've been doing. It's not a one-size-fits-all, so you can always contact your prorator if you'd like to discuss which method would best fit your specific award or your specific agency. It's also possible that if you have a database, it's already prorating your data for you. So if you're not sure, check with somebody at your agency before you prorate the data further. The 3 strategies that we are presenting today are going to be available on our prorating tool that is going to be on the website. And we're going to demo that for you in a little bit. The strategies are listed here in the preferred order for the most accurate data reporting. But again, you need to pick a strategy that's most appropriate for your agency and your agency structure. Next slide, please. The first prorating strategy and the preferred method, if possible, is prorating based on individual staff salary. So this method would be useful if your data collection system allows you to tie the individuals served and the services provided to a specific staff member. You would calculate the percentage of the staff member or the staff salary that is supported by MOVA funding and only report that percentage of data on the OMT. You can calculate this also using staff hours. It would be the same percentage, but in our prorating tool, it does use the salary. So here you can see we would have Hannah, if she's 50% MOVA funded, we would report half of her people she served. So she served 80 people, we would report 40. So you can see here, as an agency in this situation, we served 205 people total. But if we took the percentage of each of those salaries and prorated it, we were left with 113 that you'd be reporting on the OMT. And this is the same when we say MOVA administered award. This could be your VSS, Safe Plan, CSBS award, whatever percent of that award they're funded through MOVA versus their total salary that they receive from your agency. Next slide, please.
Next, okay. Next, we're going to go over some examples. We're going to be doing a Zoom poll that will pop up. And we have a couple of these examples that we're going to go through. So example 1, Hannah's total salary is $80,000. She's 50% VSS funded and 50% funded by another funding source. She provided 250 services to 100 total individuals. What would be reported on the OMT for Hannah? Would it be A, 100 services and 40 individuals, B, 125 services and 50 individuals, or C, 250 services and 100 individuals? So I will just give this a couple seconds, get some answers in, and then go through the answer and obviously why that is the answer. Okay, looks like we have a lot of answers in. And in this case, the answer is B, 125 services and 50 individuals. So it's important to pull out the total number of services and the total number of individuals and then apply it by that VSS funded or MOVA administered funding percentage. So in this case, 50%. So 50% of 250 would be 125 and 50% of 100 individuals would be 50 individuals. So in this case, you would be reporting 125 services for those 50 individuals. Next slide. Okay, and now slide 2, or example 2 rather. Laura's total salary is $55,000. Her full-time weekly schedule is 40 hours a week. 10 hours a week are VSS funded, which is 25%, and the other 30 hours are funded by another funding source, 75%. Laura provided 500 services to 200 total individuals. What would be reported on the OMT for Laura? Would it be A, 125 services for 50 individuals, B, 100 services for 40 individuals, or C, 250 services for 100 individuals? Okay, we got some quick responses.
Doing some quick math here.
Yeah. Okay, so for this answer, it is A, 125 services for 50 individuals. Again, like in the last example, we're going to pull out the total number of services versus the total and the total number of individuals and apply that to that 25% to get 125 services for 50 individuals. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, the second prorating strategy is similar to the first one, but it's going to be based on the total staff salary percentage that is funded by the MOVA awards rather than the individual staff salary. So this method is useful if your data collection system does not allow you to tie individuals served to a specific staff member, or your agency structure is not compatible with this first method. And by this, I mean, you may not have one advocate assigned to one individual that works with them throughout the whole time they're seeking services. You might have multiple staff members working with one person. In this case, strategy 2 might be the most appropriate for your agency. Here you will add up the total salaries of those working on the grant and the total of the salaries that's MOVA funded, and you would come up with one percentage that you would use to prorate all of the data that you collect. So you can see here in the example, these are the same salaries from the first strategy, but now we would add up the salaries that are MOVA supported, add up the total staff salaries, and get that 153%. So we would have, if we serve 205 people, we would report 109 on the OMT. All right, next slide, we'll have another quiz.
Okay. Hannah is 50% VSS funded, Amelia is 10% VSS funded, and Red is 65% VSS funded. What is the total percentage of data you should be reporting on the OMT? Would it be A, which is 50%, an average of all three percentages, B, 150, which is the total of all three percentages, or C, we cannot answer this without knowing staff salaries dollar amount? Okay, we're getting our answers in. Okay, we have close results for this. So it's in between A and C, which is good. This is why we want to have this question. So actually in this example, the answer is C. We cannot answer this without knowing the staff salaries in dollar amounts. So like Amelia had referenced on the last slide, we want to take the total budget versus the MOVA administered budget to get that percentage, rather than doing an individual level. So we would need to know the staff salaries in order to get the correct prorating percentage.
Amelia and Hannah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just before we move on to the next strategy, there was a question in the Q&A that I was thinking we could answer verbally, just to pause and this question came up with the first strategy, so I just don't want to move too far ahead. So the question was, where you are reporting services for 50 individuals and 125 services, is it okay if it's not a perfect matchup? So 125 services were not necessarily for 50 individuals. It may have been 125 services were for 30 individuals or 60, but does that matter? I don't know if either of you can answer that, or if maybe we can get some clarification.
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. We want to be sure that we're applying the same data proration percentage to both the number of individuals and the number of services. But yes, it could be 30 or it could be 60. We just want to be sure that we're applying that same percentage across all the data.
Yeah, so if you're reporting 10%, you want to do 10% of how many people you served, 10% of how many services you provided for every data point that you're reporting on the OMT.
So it's not a simple one-to-one. Okay. Hopefully, Caddy, hopefully that answered your question, but feel free to message me directly if that didn't. And just going back to strategy 2 as well, there was a question that came up with strategy 2. So to clarify, do you include supervisors in this calculation? This was regarding the dollar amount being prorated based on the data. So if the supervisors are providing direct services, they should be included in the calculation.
Yep. And if you only have supervisors on your budget, then strategy 3 might be the best option for you, which we'll talk about now. Strategy 3 is based on the entire program budget. So it's rather than on staff salaries. So to calculate your prorating percentage using this method, you will want to determine how much of the agency budget is dedicated to victim services, and then determine what percentage of that is funded by your MOVA administrative board. And that percentage will be how much you prorate your data. So this can be used if you don't have staff salaries on your budget. For example, if you only provide shelter nights, you don't have staff salaries, or if you only have supervisor salaries on your budget, that this might be a good option for you. And you can see here in the example that the total agency budget, if 70% is funded by MOVA, then you would use that 70% prorations. when you report your data. I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay. So Program B has a total agency budget of $500,000. MOVA funds 50% of this budget, $250,000. The program provided 2,500 services to 600 individuals. So what would be reported? A, 1,875 services and 450 individuals. B, 1,000 services and 240 individuals. Or C, 1,250 services and 300 individuals. Okay. Our answer is quick on this one. So the answer to this one is C. I'd be 1,250 services for 300 individuals and 300 individuals. Again, we'll be taking that 50% and applying it to the number of services and numbers of individuals. And then next, I'm going to be passing it over to Red, who's going to walk through the data proration tool that we've created and can now offer. So I'll pass it over to you, Red.
Thank you, Hannah. So I'll be walking through this data proration tool that we've created. I believe it's already up on the website if I'm not mistaken, but I'll walk you all through how to enter the data into this tool, how to select which proration method you want to use, all that sort of thing. So here's the data proration tool. So it's an Excel sheet that we have provided. The first tab here is just some instructions on how you should be using this tool, how to enter your data. Specifically, you shouldn't be using this tool if you already have prorated data. So some subrecipients may already have some database that prorates their data already. So then you don't need to use this tool. You don't want to enter that data into here as well, because then you'll be prorating your data twice. So this is for instances where you either have a preference for using this tool or you don't have another system to prorate your data by. So when entering your data, the main tab you'll be working with and getting your prorated numbers is this OMT eGrants report tab. Here, you'll be able to select your proration type, and then you'll be able to, once you complete and enter all of your data, it'll give you the prorated numbers. So important to note is that for the demo and services and goals tabs, this is where you'll be entering the data directly to be prorated, but you won't be able to enter the data if you haven't yet selected a proration method. So if you see here, if I try to enter that there were 2 individuals served in period 1, I'll get an error here. So it's important that before you do anything to decide what proration type you'd like to use. So I'm going to walk through each of the methods, first of which will be that strategy 1, that is the individual salary level. So under the proration type, you'll want to select staff salary, and then this area will come up here for which proration level you'd like to use. Here you want to then select individual. You'll then see all of these boxes here that will correlate back to the OMT, auto-populate with numbers. And on the right side here, this box will appear where you can enter each employee's name, the salary supported by MOVA administered ward, and then the total staff salary. So just for example, let's put in some numbers. So let's say I receive $50,000 from a MOVA administered ward, and I have a total salary of $70,000. So then my proration percent will be 71%. So at the individual salary proration level, for the number of individuals that I serve or services that I provide, that'll be prorated by 71%. And then when you go to the demo and services tab or the goals tab, you'll see that now the boxes under this staff member are no longer grayed out, and now you can enter the data here. So we could say that I served 100 individuals this period, and then this will auto-populate here by that 71%, now saying that I served 71 individuals in period 1. And you can enter up to, I believe this is about 10, 11 employees that you can enter. So let's say we also want to enter Hannah at, let's say, 60,000 out of 80,000. Out of 80,000. So then she would be prorated at 75%. However, since I still haven't entered any data for Hannah yet, and I've only entered data for myself, there's still only that 71. But then if I go in and enter another 100 for Hannah, then in the box here, it'll do that 71. And since she's entered 100 and then would have received 75, it would be 71 plus 75. So 146 then would be reported this period. You can also scroll down and there will be each period that you can enter the data by. So if you're entering the data for period 1, it'll be in the top few cells, then period 2, period 3, and period 4. And then that's the same exact thing with the goals tab. So with that, you'll just want to enter all the data for all of your boxes, and then it'll prorate everything that you need for the demo and services tab that you would then enter onto the OMT. So you can prorate by demographics, by gender, by age, by victimizations, everything that you would enter onto OMT. Now for the second strategy, which is doing the total staff salary level, you then want to change the proration level to total. You want to make sure your proration type is still set to salary, and then your proration level is to total. And you still want to enter on the right over here all of your employees. However, here, just as Hannah and Melia showed, we want to sum up how much of salary is supported by MOVA administered award, and how much is supported, how much is the total staff salary. So 110,000 over 150,000 is 73%. And so then all the data that we enter here, we can now only enter into our first column here. So while you still see this here, it is no longer prorating by that amount. So when we have our total staff salary and we want to say we had 200 individuals served, it is now being prorated at a different percentage than it previously was. So 73% of 200 will be 147 is what you would then report for the OMT. And so that's the only real big difference between entering between the individual level and total level is that you want to make sure that you've selected which proration level you want to do. You want to make sure for both you have all of your employees and their salaries entered. And then just depending upon whether you're doing individual level, you'll enter all of the data for each individual versus at the total level, you'll enter the total aggregate for the all employees serving under MOVA administered award. So last but not least, I'll show you all how we'll do the budget amount, which is the strategy 3. So here we want to change all of this back to enter level. And then under proration type, we'll want to change this to program budget. So since program budget doesn't have these 2 individual levels we can choose by, there won't be any option there. But this box here will appear. So here you can enter your agency name, the budget that's supported by MOVA administered award. So let's say that's 50,000. And then the total budget, which is 70,000. So then we have a total percentage of 71%. So very similar if we just reported at the individual level, just my services. And then you want to ensure back here, just like the total staff salary level, you'll only have 1 row of data to enter for each period. And you won't be able to enter data outside of this row. So again, if you try to enter 0 services here, you won't be able to. So let's say MOVA served 150 individuals using the program budget strategy. It would then prorate that by that 71%, and it would report 107 individuals served. Again, you can also change this. So if you want to change the completion status to in progress or completed, and then you can also change which reporting period that you're focusing on. So if you're instead doing period 3, you can then instead report your period 3 numbers and go down to the section here and enter these numbers. So if there were 500 individuals served during this period, you would then be reporting 357 under the program budget strategy with that 71%.
Red, somebody requested to see the demographics. So could you just go back to the demo and services tab and scroll over a little bit? Yep, so if you have 150 people you would put in the total individuals that you serve for all of the demographics. So you can put some sample numbers in there maybe. Thank you.
So we would say, let's say there's 50, and we'll just say that there was 50 general. You could also go and select your options up here. If you do have that specific data available to you. If not, you could just report under the general. You would also be able to report on the right. So Asian general, let's say there was 30. And again, you could select all the different options available. And you can just go through and enter all of this data one by one, just as you would on the OMT. You could also type in here if you want to specify some other race that wasn't previously listed and reporting the same number into the cell below. And you can also report if there were multiple races or if there was not reported or not tracked. So if there were 5 multiple races and then 5 not reported. And if you go back to the OMT eGrants report, it will then prorate all this data here for you. So we reported, I believe it was 50 American Indian Alaska natives. It then prorated by that 71% and gave us 36. Same thing for Asian. Scrolling down for the multiple races, we reported 5, I believe, at 71%. And so it does round to the clearest whole, to the closest whole number for you as well. Same with the individuals not reported. So yeah, that's the data proration tool.
So thank you, Red, Amelia, Hannah, and Laura for presenting that helpful material. We do have some questions in the chat that are remaining, and from the audience perspective, I'm not sure if audience members can see the Q&A that has been answered. So, but there were a couple questions that I think are worth talking through out loud, just to clarify a few things that have come up during the presentation. So I'll talk about some of the questions and answers that have been responded already, but any that remaining, we can kind of go through and see which we are able to answer at this time. And if there are questions that we're unable to answer at this time, we can certainly look for a response and get back to you as soon as possible. There was a question, and I'm just trying to find it in, okay, I found it. So the individuals we serve with MOVA funding don't receive services outside of this funding. The employee may only spend 25% of their time, which is their salary, on these clients. Why would I prorate the number of individuals if I know the actual number of individuals? So I felt like this was a good point for clarification, and Amelia answered this question in writing, but in this case, you would not have to prorate, and you would only have to prorate if you were unable to tell us which of those services were provided with the MOVA funding. So not everyone that is in this room, not every program that is supported by MOVA dollars may be required to prorate. So Hannah and Amelia walk through a few different instances of when organizations may be required to prorate, but if you're still unsure, we can provide one-on-one technical assistance, and you can tell us about your other funding sources, how the program is kind of situated with funding in the different advocates or employees that are supported through MOVA funding, and we can help you decide which strategy may make the most sense, or even help you determine if prorating makes sense given each kind of unique situation that comes up. So our team is here to support. And another question too that came up, and then I'm going to pass it to our team to kind of answer any other lingering questions that we're able to at this time. But the tool that Red just walked through, so this is not a required tool to use. It is an optional resource. So if you don't have a data system in place, or if you don't have a method in place to prorate data, if you need to prorate data, this is a tool that was developed by our team to be able to support this requirement. So it is optional, nothing that we will check to see if you're using. But if you don't have a system in place to prorate data, and if you're in a position where you would have to, we would encourage you to utilize that tool. Was there any questions in the Q&A, Amelia, Hannah, Laura, Fred, that?
Yeah, I was going to answer this question from Melissa. If you prorate demographics and the rounding causes the total number of individuals served to not match the demographics, will that be an issue? So a lot of you know on our e-grant system, if you put in too many people served, it will cause an error and not let you report it. So in that case, you would round it to the closest number that would allow you to enter the data. So if it was 100 people that you served, and then you round it and you get 101 for the race, you would go in and see which one was the least close to the number and just round one down. It's not perfect, but that's the system that I've been using when I report our data. So that's the best way to do it. Somebody else asked if these are the only proration strategies that will be accepted by MOVA. And the answer to that is no. You may have your own proration strategy that works the best for you. We would likely go over at a site visit with you. Laura would do that when she does your site visit, make sure that it's accurate and it's working. But no, these are not the only methods. There's lots of methods for prorating. These are the 3 that are on the tool. So these are the ones we chose to present, but it really depends on your agency and how your agency is set up and how you collect data.
And I would say based on the example you gave, Jennifer, that sounds like you are prorating correctly.
I do see a couple of questions in here that are pretty program specific. So if that's the case, we will connect offline to work one-on-one to find exactly what strategy works the best for you. Since every single agency is different, we can work, like I said, one-on-one. We can set up some TA to meet and go over which strategy we think will be the best. I did see one question, not sure of the complete context for it, but it says, what's the rationale for needing to know the percentage and total salary as opposed to just one or the other? I'm not sure which strategy this was referencing. I'm assuming it was strategy number 2, which is based on the total staff salary. So in this case, we need to know both the salary and the percentage because we cannot get the percentage without the staff salary. So in this case, you'd be adding up all of the staff salary and then by your MOVA administered award. And then you'd also be adding up all the staff salary for your total program budget to get that proration percentage. So in order to get that percent, you need all staff salary. I hope that's what that question was referencing, but if not, just leave another Q&A and I'll try and clear that up.
I saw 2 more that I know the answer to. So somebody asked, is data proration only required if staff are only partially funded by a MOVA award, or will programs be expected to prorate data at all based on the split of their funding for their MOVA award, i.e. ARPA or VOCA? You do not need to prorate based on what funding you're getting, VOCA or ARPA. I know that we notify programs of what funding source their award is coming from, but it will just be for your total MOVA award. It doesn't matter what funding source it's coming from. If your employee is fully funded by the MOVA award, no matter where your funding source is coming from, you would not need to prorate. And Michael also asked for strategy 3, is the per budget limited to the part of the budget supporting victim services, or does it include the organization's total budget? So you want to use the part of your program budget that's dedicated to victim services. That would be for number 3, you would do how much of your program budget is dedicated to victim services, and then how much of that is funded by MOVA.
I see we have one remaining question that is unanswered that I think Tahana's mention feels more programmatic specific, so we will be in touch directly to answer that question. And we still have a few minutes, so if there are any remaining questions, thoughts, ideas that we can answer while we're online, we'll keep the Zoom open for a few more minutes. But otherwise, I think all of the questions that we had that we were able to answer today have been answered.
I think some people learned that they did not need to prorate and left, which is fine as well.
Thank you, everybody, for participating today and asking some great questions. And as we all have said, our team is here to support offline, do some one-on-one technical assistance if needed, and to help you figure out what strategy makes the most sense for your organization if needed.
And I will put the link to the prorating tool in the chat. I'm not sure if somebody did that already, but I will put it in.
And we will share, this has been recorded. We will post this on our website and share when it is available to view at another time. All right, I'm seeing the attendees dropping, so I think we are in no more questions that are pending outside of the question that we'll follow up directly on. So I think we are good to